I'm looking at life through a very different lens now than I used to. It didn't feel safe for me to be happy. It didn't feel safe for me to...
You know, one of the expansive life I'm able to live today, I truly believe came as a result of that. But it's so hard. I don't want to insult anyone by saying
anxiety and gratitude can't occupy the same space. Catastrophic thoughts might still be there, but it's how long I remain in that state. I had so many surgeries. I had all the flesh on my stomach removed in an effort to...
Because I know what it is to live in such darkness, and I don't live there anymore. So I've got a very low bar for what constitutes a good day.
Exactly.
Right?
She got what she wanted and she couldn't cope. So therefore...
But maybe the universe thought she'd be a great mum of 4. And somebody said to me once, it's those of you who worry about being bad mothers who are the best mothers.
I was having a great day just because I wasn't feeling...
I really get that.
Like I didn't want to open my eyes.
It's fascinating as women how we take on other people's stuff.
There will be lightness again, that you will laugh again, you will feel joy, you will.
Motivational speaker, author and columnist Emma Campbell has been living with secondary breast cancer since 2014. But more than that, she was diagnosed just months after having triplets and while her marriage to their dad was disintegrating. A warrior, a survivor and a compassionate advocate of living life to the full, Emma's story is inspirational. She's known as Limitless Em to her tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, and now we get the pleasure of her company here with us. I can't wait. Welcome to the No Filter Zone, the home of real, unfiltered conversation about life as a woman today. Emma Campbell.
Hi, Jo.
I am so excited to be talking to you. So I followed you on Instagram for years. You are Limitless Em. You're living with a cancer diagnosis for a long time, and you're a mum of triplets and another child. I want to start, if I can, with what I think is your most amazing message, which is living a full life whilst knowing you have cancer. Can you even begin to explain to me how you've gone about doing that?
I'm 14 years in from my initial diagnosis. Yeah. And as I've heard myself say quite a lot recently, that kind of whole mindset of, you know, being determined and to live a full, fulfilling, limitless life in a way, that's not been an overnight thing. That's not something that I could access in any way in those first few years, 5 years, even 8, 9 years. It's really only in the last probably 5, 6 years that I guess after reaching like a real mental health rock bottom with the ongoing anxiety and the living as though I was dying, even though on paper things were really good in terms of my cancer sort of status. So it's been a very long time coming, and it's something that I don't sit in that space every minute of the day. But that is my desire and intention, and that is something that I feel so strongly that I hope that other people can access that as well. And the reason I can access it is, a lot of internal work, but also observing how other women and how other people living with a secondary diagnosis or some kind of potential life-limiting illness. It's really from observing other people as well, So it's an ongoing desire, and it's sometimes easier to live than others. But that is something that I feel so strongly about.
When you talk about living with that limitless attitude, it reminds me of how I talk about confidence as a confidence coach. People assume that I feel confident all the time, or that confidence is a perennial state. And I'm always at pains to say, no, absolutely not. But today I feel like I've got a toolkit to get back to confidence much more quickly than I ever had before. I have a choice to make. And it sounds like you're saying a similar thing.
Exactly
with
that.
This limitlessness.
And exactly, because I changed my Instagram handle about sort of 5, 6 years ago from M+4, I was M with the kids, to Limitless Em. And as I've said many times, again, it wasn't because I think I'm so limitless. It's because fundamentally I believe that we all have limitless potential. So really that handle is to serve as a daily reminder to me, and possibly anyone else, hopefully. But to me, it's like we do have that limitless potential and that limitless capacity for for overcoming and for, and just learning and gathering the tools, like you say, and that emotional toolbox. They're all kind of words, aren't they? And they can sound a little bit kind of cliched in a way, but I think that's what so many of us are doing. We're doing the work slowly but surely. We're realizing there's no arrival point in life. But we know that I'm leaping ahead slightly. But one of the other things I often refer to is I'm living life through a very different lens. I'm looking at life through a very different lens now than I used to.
Okay, I'd really love to hear about those lenses. So what was the previous lens? And then what's today's lens?
The previous lens, which I think I was kind of born with, was a very, very naturally catastrophic.
Fear-based.
Hugely fear-based, hugely anxiety-based, even as a small child. Kind of, it's not like I came out that way, huge sort of attachment issues. And my life as a child and then a teenager and even into my 20s, I kept myself very small and safe, that's a huge sort of thing to go into, but that's essentially how it was. So I would always think the worst. I would always feel that, if there was an ambulance driving by, it was my dad, he's 90 soon, was and still am very close to, something had happened. So it was always the worst case scenario. So of course, and also interestingly, I didn't grow up fearing my own health struggles in a sort of hypochondriac way. But I always had this fear of cancer. It's interesting. But it was never really about me. But I'd be drawn to cancer memoirs, be drawn to those kind of stories. Yeah, so that was kind of my default setting.
Your lens.
Yeah, my lens. And so I guess then the diagnosis came for me.
And you were how old?
I was 38-ish 38, 39 when I got the diagnosis, primary breast cancer diagnosis. And, got the secondary diagnosis 4 years later. And it was years and years and years. And then the third diagnosis in 2019, and it was only from kind of having to just endure those really, really dark times. Like I said, it didn't feel safe for me to be happy. It didn't feel safe for me I didn't know how to access joy or lightness because I was living with this black cloud and this cancer boulder, as I often describe it, blocking out the sun, blocking out any moments of light. And it really was a kind of, as a result of, as I've said, observing the way other people through social media, through Instagram, observing the other way other people were like, what, she's laughing, or she doesn't know what those scam results are going to say, but she's still out there. She's just slowly but surely, I just began to adopt that way of looking at things, along with practicing gratitude and kind of, therapy and all of those things, and running and the running kind of aspect. But a huge part of it, I think, was down to, finding the incredible community online, connecting with Deborah James and when you see someone with such a life force and such a determination to eke joy out of as many moments as possible, the longer you're around that, it can't not have an effect.
Well, they say that we are the sum total of, is it the people we spend the most time with, the 5 people we spend the most time with, something like that.
Yeah.
So if you're hanging out with people like Deborah James, who I want to come on to, that's going to spill over, definitely. So if your lens before was one of fear, if you were looking through glasses of fear at the world before, how would you describe your glasses now, today?
It fluctuates, as we all do, in every given moment.
You're human.
And that's the other thing that I realise as well. But it's, that kind of idea now that, okay, the fear can still surge up and it can feel overwhelming. The catastrophic thoughts might still be there, but it's how long I remain that kind of in that state. So I think I've become much better at acknowledging, observing, feeling the anxiety, and rather than just floundering and completely being at the mercy of it, kind of just like you said, thinking, okay, right, let's come back to this cup of coffee in my hands and how it tastes and the kind of thank you. And I say it over and over again, but it really is, if I'm really, really struggling, my go-to sort of ointment is simply, when my thoughts are spiraling, when I'm feeling that physical fear, whatever it's regarding, I just kind of come back to a thank you. And it will be as simple as, oh, thank you for this comfortable chair and this coffee in my hand and the warmth of the cup. Because fear and anxiety and gratitude can't occupy the same space. And that was a fundamental sort of awakening for me when I realized that. That was a starting point, 5-6 years ago. And that's never changed. I've got that now. That is a rooted core belief in me. And there are days where I feel so incredibly limitless and so powerful in my own way, and so with such an access to joy, despite ongoing hospital treatment and despite the uncertainty of the future, despite all the other worries that we have, financial worries, single parenting, concerns about our kids, concerns about everything. I can really access the above and beyond. I can go above all of that. And I really sort of can connect to just this incredible world that we live in and our potential. And there are other times where I feel small and a bit shrunken.
But isn't that who we are as people? We are like both, right? We are expansive and really significant, and we're also very insignificant in just small parts of the whole.
I know. And I think the ongoing journey around it and the ongoing kind of realization is that, we are making progress, whether we realize it or not. But on those days when we feel, like I said to you before we started today, I'm having a little bit of a not quite connected to my limitless potential today, feeling a little bit raw for various reasons, a little bit fragile, a little bit thin-skinned. But I do know that this is a temporary feeling, and it might, and it's always coming back to our center in some way, It
sounds really spiritual to me when you're saying thank you, because I use gratitude every evening. I finish my day with a gratitude list, and it could be, I've said this before, it could be, the basil seeds that I sowed 10 days ago have sprouted. Like, it could be as small as that, or it could be, I got a book deal today. Like, tiny things, or the smile someone gave me when I was buying a coffee. And then obviously big things. Although interestingly, the big things almost often don't make it to the list because they're almost too big, but someone asked me once, well, who are you grateful to? Who are you saying thank you to? And it's a very personal thing for me. And I'm interested for you if you'd be willing to talk about who or what you're saying thank you to.
I think it is that kind of universal source.
Yeah, right.
I think it's that source energy. It's that universal,
what people used to call God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if I'd call it a higher self. I think it is just that sort of, I've become very sort of, in a very non-scientific way, because I don't have that kind of brain, but the kind of neuroscientific, Joe Dispenza, that kind of really stepping outside of ourselves and realizing that we are just that oneness, I guess. And I try to connect with that, and when I connect with that feeling of expanse again, and when I'm saying thank you, it is thank you to kind of everything. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. It makes total sense to me. And I'm so interested in the concept of unity and how we live in a very individualistic society. I think I've just said that right. And yet what we need as humans is connection and unity. And you talked about 10 minutes ago about finding a tribe on Instagram who've helped you. And
hugely.
And I'm struck by that's connection, that's unity, and that's plugged you back into your life and your life force in the same way that thanking universal energy, whatever it is, source, that's what actually as people we need.
Connection for me is my most overused word, I think. It's just what I've realized makes me, I'm not a fan of that, makes me tick, but that's what fills me up. I'm someone that craves, needs, loves, desires, is fed by connection, and it's reciprocal. And often the Instagram platform, for example, and finding myself part of, whether it's not just the cancer community, but a community of mainly women, incredibly, but it's very reciprocal, and people will often say, thank you so much for sharing your story. It really helps. And I always sort of say, but you're helping me too. And just whether you're an observer, whether you're just watching the way other women in particular are living and managing and striving and overcoming, there's such a mutual I feel such a mutual hand-holding and safety. And I know that I'm grateful that I'm someone who's very open, hence the podcast name. But my podcast is very much connection through open-hearted conversations, because that's what nourishes me. Even we've only just met today, but I feel a connection already.
Definitely.
And what a relief. And I feel held and I feel safe. And so and that's just on a Wednesday morning, and then we'll go about the rest of our days. But when you're sitting in a waiting room, or you're waiting for results, or you're having some kind of other issue, just to know that there is that feeling of holding.
And that comes from vulnerability.
Yeah. And not being afraid of being vulnerable.
Mm.
And it's not a weakness. Vulnerability
it's the biggest strength.
It's not a weakness,
What I don't want to stay with cancer too long,
No.
But what has cancer taught you? Because it's a big slap in the face, right? You're young, you've got triplets, we'll come on to them, and another child, your marriage is disintegrating, and then you get told you've got cancer. That's 14 years ago, I think you said. I mean, you just went into such a crisis.
Yeah.
But what's it taught you?
Cancer has, we would all go back and say, well, I wish it wasn't cancer that had taught me this. But it has shaped me and strengthened me and opened me up. I guess that kind of classic thing of it's corny line again, but I guess it sort of broke me, stripped me back. But the person I am now, I do have an appreciation. I don't always feel strong, but I do kind of think, bloody hell, I have it's probably, I don't want to say anything that probably has been the making of me in a way.
Yeah, I see that. It's okay to say that.
Yeah. And it would be so wonderful if it hadn't had to come. But I don't know if my life would be anywhere near as fulfilling and full of the possibility that I feel if it hadn't come along. Because for whatever reason, I was still choosing to keep myself very small and safe. And that's probably too big a conversation for here. Whether it's childhood stuff, whether it's my own, natural low confidence, but there's something in me that has emerged, and particularly over the last few years. So again, it wasn't 14 years ago, it wasn't 10 years ago. The feeling of living in crisis remained for a very, very, very long time. And I think that became such a sort of part of my DNA that, like I said, living as though even when things were technically okay on paper, I that hypervigilant state, that, just waiting, red alert, waiting for the next kind of
fight or flight.
And that's, as we know, that's such an exhausting and a very, very non-creative way to live. You can't create when you're in a state.
When you're in panic.
You can't.
I don't want to, it's interesting. I hear your reluctance to put a positive spin on cancer, because obviously we're aware that there are people for whom cancer is, hastening the end of their life and causing destruction. But you are someone living with cancer for 14 years.
Term.
You are completely allowed to say that it's done positive things for you. In a very similar but much less way, I relate because in 2011, I was told I had cancer on my left breast. And it woke me up. And I realized that I was never going to be happy in my marriage. And I had 3 small children. And I left my marriage. And then they took the lumps away and said, we've made a mistake. It's not cancer.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have always been really reluctant to talk about this because I feel so lucky that the word cancer visited my life. I inhabited that space for 6 weeks. I took a massive decision to leave my marriage and change my life. And like me being here today, doing this job with my career, and the expansive life I'm able to live today, I truly believe came as a result of that. But it's so hard. I don't want to insult anyone by saying cancer was a gift, but it was.
For those 6 weeks,
it changed me.
You had
absolutely
cancer
in my head,
in terms of what you've been told.
And my youngest was 2. I was like, and my thoughts were, there is no way I'm dying. I've got 3 small daughters. That's just not happening. And I remember saying to the universe, there is no way I'm dying. Like, that is not happening.
Whereas I couldn't access that at that point. I was like, I'm dying.
I mean, listen, there were thoughts that I'm dying, but I kept saying, no, not having it, not having it. And then afterwards, the doctors were saying, it was interesting because some of them were saying, we're really sorry. We feel like we screwed your life up. And I was like, you have not screwed my life up. This is what I needed. Because my God, it was the shock that I was just like, I can't carry on like this. And, my girl's dad he's not a bad man. We were just in a very unhappy situation. And I knew I had to leave. On the other hand, there are some doctors who've said, we never said you had cancer in the first place. And on my notes, it doesn't actually say that they said that. And I'm like, but you did. You gave me piles and piles of leaflets and I had surgery. And there's this kind of bluff around it.
Yeah. Grey area.
Which I find really more frustrating.
Yeah, of
because
course.
I want on record that I mentally lived in that space for 6 weeks. And the terror and the determination that it brought up in me was enormous.
It needs to be acknowledged.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, my acknowledgement is the life I've got today. And I've since remarried. I was on my own for 6 years, like you were for 6 years between your first husband and meeting your second. 3 kids is hard. Let's come on to that. You had 4 children.
Yeah.
And you left a marriage. And that's what I want to talk about. Society's judgment of us when we leave a marriage, when we've got children.
It was slightly different. So we weren't married, but that's kind of irrelevant.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. We've been together. So my eldest son, Jake, who is now nearly 21, he was 6 when the triplets were born.
Yep.
And so we'd been a family of 3 for only 7 or 8 years because it all happened quite quickly. But we were a family of 3, and many of those, the recent year, the 3 or 4 years before the babies were born, I'd been struggling with secondary infertility, and and a very, very all-consuming obsession with having baby number 2, which is what my vision of my family was,
yes.
To have another baby. And I really feel it's important to say that and maybe one day I'll get the opportunity to say that to him. I don't know, because I haven't seen him for a decade. But I'm
the kid's dad.
Yeah, I'm very aware of the toll that took.
Your obsession with becoming a mum again.
All-consuming desire, and on any marriage or relationship. So it's not the beating myself up, but it's a fact. It's a hugely stressful thing to go through, infertility. And secondary infertility has a whole other level, because there's a sort of not guilt attached to it, but you have the classic, but you've got a child.
Be grateful for what you've got kind of thing.
Yeah, all of that. And it's like, it's a very different feeling, because almost, of course, you have the inner thing of, I've got my baby, I'm so lucky, that should be enough. But because you love that baby so much, then there's all this love that you want them to have the experience of a sibling, and you just, and everyone, I think, has an idea of what their family is. And for me, it was of 4. So I'm very aware that was an ongoing source of stress. But the relationship, was very unhealthy in many ways. There was a very frightening level of volatility in it. So by the time I was pregnant with the triplets, we were in a very fragile state, and it was becoming more and more, I guess, unsafe, without going into too much detail, for me, physically and emotionally. And I'm sure if he was sitting here, there'd be and we were in a therapy session, there would be clarity and reasons why, but there was a lack of being able to control his volatility, which made it very, very frightening. So by the time there was something in me that clicked in, by the time the babies were born, and he actually brought the relation, he said that we needed to separate, but then he changed his mind very quickly and then proceeded to sort of not want that at all. But by that point, I thought, I cannot be a mother to these. This is pre the diagnosis. I have to be safe. Every bit of my energy is going to have to go into looking after these babies. So from the time they were born until they were 5 months old, it was a horrifically difficult time of me begging for space and begging to be kind of given the space to look after the babies without this fear and these dramas and kind of 999 calls and, really not physical abuse, but a lot of very frightening situations.
It's some sort of abuse.
Yeah. And I think I still haven't dealt with that, which is probably why I play it down.
Yeah, you are playing that down.
The fact that I would be turning up at domestic violence drop-in centres on a Monday morning, but doing that classic, oh yeah, but he doesn't hit me. And I suppose, this is a very personal thing to say, but I carry a lot of guilt still because I wanted a baby so much. And then 3 came along, which is never the plan. And of course, they're a miracle and it's wonderful. But finding out you're having triplets ups the ante so dramatically.
Yeah.
So no wonder he spiraled in many ways. We were living in a 2-bedroom top floor flat. Neither of us were big earners. Our life was not set up in any way for multiples. And so I can really understand a sort of internal meltdown but it manifested itself unfortunately in a non-acceptable way. But
are you saying, sorry to stop you, but are you saying that in a way you feel that your desire for a baby caused these 3 to happen, which tipped him into the domestic violence stuff?
Yeah, there was stuff before that really I shouldn't have put up with, and really probably I shouldn't have been trying for a second baby. That's the honest truth. Oh, and that's where the kind of body clock and that, and I know, and I can take that and I can own that, and I can, but I carry that. I still haven't let go of that. I haven't let go of that.
Even though that's all his stuff.
It's deep.
I know, I can see that.
So when he finally, I didn't walk away from the relationship. He sort of had to go, and essentially, and
for your safety.
Yeah, he had to. So basically, he agreed on a break for a few weeks. Anyway, he eventually moved out, and I think there was another police call, and and he eventually found a flat nearby. This wasn't the end, but it was the end of our sort of relationship. But this wasn't the end of the drama. And then, meanwhile, I'd been noticing changes in my breasts. Feeding the babies around the clock. I'd been through IVF. I'd lost lots of weight. But the lump I'd always had in my breast that I'd had checked years before had changed. It had kind of disappeared. And I was very aware of it, but I was so consumed with everything that was unfolding and
triplets.
And triplets. And on the brief moments where I got to sleep, I remember sort of occasionally lying on my tummy, and I felt like, well, I'm lying on something. And that something turned out to be a 5-centimetre tumour. Oh. So that little lump that I'd had for years had changed at some point during the pregnancy.
Had you had that lump checked before?
Had it checked about 3 years earlier, and they'd said it was a cyst, and it had never changed. And then, hormonal, not in any way saying that IVF, but I was, my cancer is very hormonally driven. So you can only imagine, fertility treatment, a triplet pregnancy, estrogen, all my levels were just like through the roof. So it's hard, if anything was going to wake up this cyst, then I think all of that. So it was only a few weeks after he left that I was then diagnosed with breast cancer. So that, again, took everything up to a whole other level of survival mode. He very much wanted to come back and to make it work. And I spent the next few years just feeling like desperately as I went through that never happened. He didn't ever come back, but he never broke away.
So he was still in the kids' lives?
A couple of times a week, he would come, and but it was always very much based in the home I was in, that we were in. So it became, again, it was never like he would come and take them and I would have any kind of respite. It was, the drama would continue because, so without going too deeply into it, it just carried on and on and on. And then I came through the treatment. I was in remission. I was doing well physically, emotionally, in a terrible state, convinced that I was going to get a recurrence and die imminently, even though there was no sign of that whatsoever. Babies were growing, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, all of those toddler years. It was bonkers. And then finally, when they were kind of heading towards, they were 4, they just turned 4. And something in me found the courage to say to their dad, look, we cannot go on like this. We're not together. There has to be a different routine. You need to have them once or twice a week. We need to break away. And that was a day when then things sort of crossed a line in a physical way, which was terrifying at the time. But actually, I'll never forget that moment when it had happened. Us both kind of standing there while I was sitting and he was standing in a state of shock. And it probably was a bit of an out-of-body experience for both of us, but there was something in me that went almost like, thank you. It was a line in the sand, and it was almost like it needed to happen because it was what forced me then to do the brave, not that I hadn't been brave before, but to take those final steps, which ended up with, a restraining order, which remains in place. So very sadly, he hasn't been in the children's lives for 9-10 years, even though that was not how, the courts, it was me that he wasn't allowed to contact, not the children. So I carry that as well, that should I have tried harder to maintain, but then I got within a couple of months of that all being finalised, I then got my secondary diagnosis. So I was consumed by that. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm really going to die now. It was not the time. And I just met the person who went on to become my husband. And it wasn't the time to, it was a relief that I wasn't having to deal with their dad. Gosh, it sounds so, it's just like so many headlines of soap opera style, it feels. There's a lot of soap opera
you have
headlines.
some shame, don't you, around all of these. So you said to me before, it's like Jeremy Kyle, and I'm like, no, you've just had a lot thrown at you. Life has just thrown you a lot. And I think life's thrown so much at you because you've got such an amazing voice and you're such an inspiration to so many people. Most people would have crumbled at just the triplets or just the domestic violence situation. I'm using the word just in inverted commas here, or just the cancer diagnosis again and again and again, and yet you keep going because you keep showing us the depth of this determination you have and this life force you have.
It must be a life force. It's interesting, and I always forget to mention the kind of first soap opera aspect to my life was when Jake was born. So that was in 2003, nearly 21 years ago. And he came early. I had an emergency C-section. And within a few days, I was at death's door. I developed necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh-eating bacteria.
Yeah, I remember reading about that in your book.
Yeah, so that was absolutely like the stuff of nightmares.
Terrifying.
My family were told I probably wouldn't make, the weekend. I was in intensive care. I had so many surgeries. I had all the flesh on my stomach removed in an effort to stop, to get it. You literally kind of are being eaten alive.
Is that like a hospital buck?
I went in as a well person.
Right.
And
okay.
Yeah, that's a whole other, but yes, it's something, how it was acquired, I'll never really know. But that was a kind of very, very traumatic thing. And I think that added to this desire when we started trying for a second baby, because Jake was, absolutely fell in love. Jake was the gift, this wonderful boy. I was robbed of those early, those early weeks and months, and that first year of his life were not how any mother wants them to be. Again, I was recovering from major surgery. I had more major surgery to come, reconstruction. I was very traumatized by that. So I bonded with him very deeply, and I have that incredible bond with Jake. But I think when he was 2.5 and it was like, right, let's start trying for another baby, I thought, right, this time.
You'll do it standard.
Yeah. No such thing as standard in my world. So I think, again, everything's just been so heightened for whatever reason. And I can't quite, and on some level, I think, did I come into this lifetime with a kind of this soul contract idea of like, okay, this lifetime round, there's going to be some challenges, but,
But look at the growth and look at the message.
The growth is immense and the stretch marks are there, and sometimes it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wouldn't change a bit of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I often feel like it sounds crazy. Sometimes I feel like the luckiest person alive, not just because I'm alive still, but just because I feel I have access to so much appreciation. Because I think so many people go through life without that awareness of the beauty and the fragments of joy. And I feel like that's something no one can ever take away from me, even if I can't access it on a day. You know, I have such awareness of what's precious and what's important.
Yeah. You know, I think it's Rumi that said that
Yes.
it's our pain that cracks us open enough for the light to get in. And I've been to some really, really dark places in my life. And I'm very lucky that I hold on to those, not in a negative way, but in a way that if I wake up and every day I wake up that I'm not in that negative space, I'm grateful. Because I know what it is to live in such darkness, and I don't live there anymore. So I've got a very low bar for what constitutes a good day.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And so therefore, that's joy and that's gratitude, right? Because I'm not depressed. I'm not, knee deep in some sort of crisis. The trauma from my childhood has been dealt with to a level where I can, live with it, and I'm not rooted in it anymore. It's never going to go completely. And that gives me access to just joy in the tiniest things.
That's what I say so much. I talk about the magical mundane. And, when you are in crisis, all you want is to be sitting in a traffic jam or kind of, in the supermarket queue or kind of whatever, just doing life admin or cooking the kids their dinner. Or loading the washing machine, because that is a privilege. And that's what I think that's one of the huge, exactly what you've just said,
Can you talk me through loving 3 babies at once? Because, I've got 3 daughters and I had them quite closely together, but I did not have triplets. I didn't have twins. And the thought, and, when I think about, early motherhood and I had physical problems as well with mine. So there's a bit of separation, but I got home and they got on the breast and, off you go and the oxytocin's flowing and all the rest of it. I could do that, me and the one baby, 3 of them. Like, how does that even work?
Still, that's something again that is very close to the surface in terms of, that's been really hard because you can't separate what was going on in those early months. So there was I didn't have, with multiples, certainly with triplets, you're always playing catch up. Even now, how do I give all of them what they need? I don't feel like to this day, I don't feel like I've given Ella, Louis or Theo what they need, what they really need.
I would say the same with my 3.
They get fragments of me.
Yeah. Everyone gets the arse end of you.
Yeah. And that's a source of pain, guilt. I'm really good with guilt, stacking up the guilt. And certainly and I think it's different when they're tiny babies because, I certainly wasn't able to breastfeed, but they were being bottle fed.
Yeah,
and
they had the cuddle.
Yeah, they had the cuddles. Yeah. And, but I certainly haven't had what I had with Jake, even though that first year with Jake, once I got through the health crisis of when he was born, it was me and Jake, and he was carried in the sling and he was, until they came along, he was just my little right-hand man. We just, and he, he was everything. We just, and I haven't had that. And
that's painful. I can hear that's painful. What would they say then?
I just hope that we're very good at telling each other there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love.
Are they 15, your twins?
They're 14. Triplets.
Sorry, triplets.
There's a lot of love that's expressed. With my boys, it's currently feels much more free-flowing. With my daughter, I'm feeling the kind of mother-daughter disconnect, which feels very painful.
Yes, it's agony.
It's physically painful.
It is physically painful, I get it.
Want so much. I'm getting it wrong, at this point. I just hope, and it's funny because they're very, very different natures as well to their older brother. So they're very fiery. We've had real behavioural challenges, really difficult times where we've needed intervention, CAMs, ADHD diagnoses. And, it's been very, very hard to manage, and particularly as a single parent. And then within my marriage, it took its toll, and so then the love isn't free flowing because you're managing kind of behavioural issues, and whether that's because of something you're doing wrong as a parent or what they've been through, because again, they were babies when I was diagnosed, so they've only ever known me as, oh yeah, mum goes, but in a way it's a good thing because they didn't observe, they just see me as, oh, mum goes to the hospital for treatment. They don't see me as someone living with cancer in their mind, and that's a very fortunate situation. Their mind right now, my cancer isn't active as far as I know right now, and it hasn't been for a good few years. I'm incredibly lucky, and I'm very grateful that they don't. It's wonderful. It's a testament to how well I'm doing that I don't think they're consumed with concern. We're going to lose our mum. I don't think they associate particularly cancer with death, which is amazing. And that was the heartbreaking thing when Deborah was nearing the end of her life and she was on the news so much with the damehood and the Bowel Babe Fund. And they knew that, they'd met her a couple of times. They knew of our friendship, and they were like, oh, that's Deborah, that's your friend. And, oh, is she going to die? And I said, yeah, she is. And I think one of them actually said, I didn't realize you died from cancer, which is a huge thing. And in a way, you sort of think, for a personal level, for us as a family, I'm so grateful that they think that. But it's slightly skewed as well. It's a strange kind of, but I don't feel like I've needed to say anything different, at this point. And maybe that day will come.
Testament to your parenting, though, your ability to stay positive and stay present and stay limitless. I love that word. That they don't see cancer as this thing that's going to kill them.
I think they've always seen me, despite even, because of life, they see me as someone who's just on the go all the time. I'm doing everything for them. I am a solo parent again, and I am their parent. I am their one and only present parent. So they've seen me do a lot of great things, as in great things, different things. They've seen me, so they do see me live a full and busy life. So I guess in their minds, why would they, and I go off to the hospital and I come in and it's business as usual,
The hospital visits you have, that's a preventative
medicine?
Chemo.
It's like a targeted chemo. It's a kind of very, very kind chemo, as I call it. So I have my port in my chest. I go to the Royal Marsden every 3 weeks, sit in the chemo ward, attached, it's an IV infusion, just like any other chemo, but side effects wise, this is as good as it gets. It's amazing,
So are you exhausted the day after?
I'm okay. I mean, right. I think, I was put in a medically induced menopause several years ago. So there's always that kind
That's
of...
no fun.
We're always knackered, aren't we? And I have a monthly hormonal injection, which keeps my ovaries asleep. And I have real energy lows, but I think a lot of that is just life and emotion and doing it all, without really any... As much as I've got the most incredible family and wonderful emotional support, there's no one picking up the slack of my day-to-day life at all,
Let's talk about Deborah briefly, because you and her, I followed you both on Instagram and you certainly seem to be very close friends.
We developed a lovely friendship, and I'm always really aware again of she had her friends that she'd known for years and years and years. But in the context of our relationship, we shared some very, very special times. Really, we weren't meant to share, in terms of like the days that we found ourselves having chemo together, that really our schedules were never really meant to align. But they did more and more, and they were magical. And, we ran the marathon together, and that was magical. And I've said this many times, but she had the most enormous effect. And as we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, she was so pivotal in how I began. It all tied in with how I began to have that kind of shift, because to watch and observe someone like her and, many of the other people that we've lost in the community, I think, how can you're doing them a disservice? It's like, how, look at how she's managing this. Look at how she's still saying yes to life. before my secondary diagnosis, was shrinking away from life because, I didn't know how to manage what was going on in my head. And so I just almost wanted to model myself on these incredible examples, and I still do that now. I still do that now, as I'm sure many of us do. What would Deborah do? What would Deborah say? And she left such a legacy, but she also left even though maybe she might not have had a spiritual view on life, she's very grounded, very practical. But wow, she kind of almost knew how to live without having to have the angst of it, of like, well, maybe the self-help books weren't teetering by her bedside table as they are mine. But it seemed she just got it. Life is for living, life is for embracing, life is for finding every moment of joy that you can. And we all saw her do that until the very end.
Do you still talk to her sometimes?
I do, yeah, I do.
You might. What do you say to her?
Well, it's funny because Deborah died.
Is it 2 years ago now?
Nearly 2 years ago. Yeah. And around that time, there was another lovely friend called Darren, who was known online as the enlightened arsehole. He was wonderful, and we struck up a great friendship, and he died of bowel cancer. And they died within a couple of months, a month or so of each other. And I often have a chat with both of them because they both had very kind of memorable laughs. There's kind of real, head back laughing. Yeah. And both gone far too soon, both with so much to live for. So I've had many moments over the last couple of years of like, help me out, like kind of, come on, you two. Kind of, I often have a vision of them together. But I think I do. I just probably look up quite a lot and think, oh, what would you do in this moment? Yeah. Or what would you say? And I always know.
And it's normally something about live, like, go for it.
Or go for it. Or
why are you worried?
Yeah.
Interesting. So I've referenced the fact that you're an inspiration to many people and you give me that look there. But you are, how many followers have you got on Instagram?
Oh,
Quite a lot.
A very stuck number. Yeah. Good old algorithm.
What's it like being such an inspiration? For someone who clearly doesn't see herself as an inspiration, what's it like?
I can recognize, I don't want to sound so kind of, I can recognize that I maybe have a positive message, and I recognize that if I'd known where to look 10, 12, 14 years ago, I would have found comfort in someone like me, because I had there was nowhere to look that I was aware of for the positive stories. And I know what it's like. We want those positive stories. And I talk about being a long-term survivor, and I'm so proud's the wrong word because I'm lucky to be a long-term survivor. But it's something that I take seriously, and I want to get the balance right between shouting about that and also being aware of others who are not in that place.
Yeah.
So what's it like? It's humbling, very, very humbling. Like I always say, it's very reciprocal. So when I get lovely messages from people, but I'm as filled up by what I receive as what I give.
Yeah, I see that.
In
terms of...
And I want to walk the talk. Sometimes I feel I don't want to be fake. I want to be, I always want to come back to that thing of I haven't got the answers. I'm just
muddling
through. I don't know how limitless I am, but I know we all are. I know fundamentally that we all have so much within us, and that we do have such enormous capacity to overcome. But it all begins with the thoughts that we think. Everything stems back to that.
All life
and
begins with a thought. And
that's more frustrating when you know that, and then you're like, oh, okay, I know that, but I'm kind of not accessing it at the moment.
But then sharing that publicly helps other people to know that.
This is the thing.
And it is back to that vulnerability thing.
Yeah.
When I read your book, which I really loved, it was like, I thought, oh God, I'm reading a book about someone's battle with cancer, separation from a partner, triplets on her own, life's just, a shit show at the time. I'm so inspired and heartened by this book. It's so full of joy, Em. Like genuinely, it's like, oh, such a lovely book.
Thank you.
I was so struck in there by your female friendships and your local community.
Yeah, incredible.
I mean, they just rallied in a way that I really hope I would do for someone in your situation. And that back to that thing about community. But I was also really struck when I read your book about how difficult it was to be that vulnerable for you and to accept that level of help. I mean, you did because you had to, because look at what you were in. But that space of kind of being the person, I can see you're a giver, but in that space of being in that place of needing to receive so much from people, what was that like?
I think that stems back to, and again, it's a pretty heavy thing to admit. It stems back from I think, I've had to learn. I had to learn to receive, because I think we're so programmed to kind of, no.
Especially as women.
Yes.
We're the givers.
Especially as women. But I think it stems back, sadly, to the feeling of, I wanted a baby. This is a very honest thing for me to say, but I'm just going to say, I wanted a baby so much, with people around me saying, including the children's dad, are you sure? IVF, not sure. Twins, how will we cope? We're not, okay, all right, well, I was able to take that step. I had 3 babies. I suppose in the crudest sense, and I remember writing this in the book, the feeling I had was, this is so self-abandoning. This is such a unkind thought, but the unkind thought to myself was, she got what she wanted and she couldn't cope. So therefore, all of the magical, incredible help that just poured out of from every corner, from every unexpected source, from strangers, from the community, like you say, from neighbours, from
school mum friends,
everything was and I had to accept it, and I did accept it, and I surrendered to it. But I felt a level of, I should be able to, this isn't,
shedding all over ourselves as we do.
And I can hear that I sound in this conversation, I feel quite raw today,
That's a beautiful thing.
But it's true, everything I'm saying is true, and so I suppose, again, I feel like I can never repay all the kindness, ever.
Well, except to all the people you're helping.
Yeah, I don't feel like I've repaid it to all of the individuals, I feel
but you're paying it forwards is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yeah, I hope so. And then with the kids, again, that feeling of playing catch up. So I would like to liberate myself.
From that guilt and shame.
I really would, from the shackles.
Yeah. Because,
once and for all, I've come a long way, but there's a long way to go.
Yeah, I can see that. Because when I read your story, I was just thinking what a joy it would have been for everyone in your community to have been able to help. And and by the way, you didn't ask for triplets. I mean, I know you're glad you've got triplets because there are 3 amazing kids. But maybe the universe thought, she'd be a great mum of 4.
It's funny.
Maybe it wasn't because I see your narrative of, I've done this to myself and I've just got to I've made my bed, I've got to lie in it, and why would anyone want to help me narrative. From outside looking in with a kind of a more objective lens, much as I totally resonate with what you're saying, and I would probably have put myself through that hard time many years ago, I look and think, oh my gosh, the universe must have just thought, there she is. We've got 3 who've got to come together.
Yeah.
She's the vessel.
Well, it's funny because I had 3 miscarriages, in those years between. And then the 3 came along, and I always said to them when they were little, I mean, in a kind of very magical thinking kind of way, I said, I lost 3 babies, but you came back up, and they were like, did we, mummy? And I do feel like they were, I remember writing this years ago in a writing class, kind of a bit like the ones I do now, like an expressive writing class. And it was that feeling of they were waiting in the wings.
Yeah.
Each bringing so much love, but each also carrying like a hand grenade is how I described it. It's like, we're coming, we're going to put a rocket up everything. We are going to trigger so much, but we are here. And the three of them are so, I just really, really, like with Jake, with my eldest son, I have no doubt that he knows and feels and has always felt and never not felt my love consistently. And I just hope with every part of me that they know, because I think on some subliminal level, they carry unconsciously or not, subconsciously, a feeling of maybe responsibility as well. Maybe that their arrival of, I just, that's my fear, that they link themselves to what unfolded. And I just, if I can give them anything as individuals, not as a threesome, because they're individuals, and that's the hard thing with multiples, that they are just lumped together, and they're three. It's Louis, and Louis is different to Theo, and Theo is different to Louis, and Theo is different to Ella, and and it's so, but that's hard for them, let alone with all the not having the regular mum and dad and the non-health issues and the.
They'll be resilient kids.
I just hope they feel. I hope they're not too affected by abandonment and by, a mum who's not always been present and who still struggles to be present.
It's hard to be present, though. Again, that's what I was struck with your book, was you were so honest about how mind-numbingly difficult it can be when you're at home with loads of kids and just that routine and just wanting to kind of just check out and read a book or just
the checking out in those years was because I was so convinced all the time that I was in such a fear state about the cancer.
So did you keep yourself back a bit?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that affected. It was almost the fear of leaving those I cared most about in the world made loving them fully so terrifying.
I really get that. I suspect that your kids feel hugely loved. Somebody said to me once, I used to worry so much that I was a bad mother. And somebody said to me once, it's those of you who worry about being bad mothers who are the best mothers. And I can't think which psychotherapist it was. It could have been Carl Rogers, but I could be wrong here. I don't think it was him. It was someone else talked about the good enough mother, that we all just need a good enough mother.
Yes, I've heard that.
We do not need
recently.
A perfect mother is actually a curse.
Yeah.
I was like, thank God.
I know.
Thank God
I know.
for that, because it is tough.
Yeah.
And the expectations out there of us as mothers, as women, as mothers, we're sold this idea of what motherhood looks like, but then we're supposed to go out and have jobs as well and be, sauce pots in the bedroom and these perfect mothers. And it's just like, we can't do it all.
No.
We can't do it all. And even if we had one of those things to do, funnily enough, we wouldn't be able to do it perfectly anyway. We talked briefly before the cameras went on about heartbreak. And I know it's quite recent for you, but for those who've read your book, there was you met a man, you fell in love with him. In fact, he came to do up your house, didn't he, with a TV show? You met a man, you guys fell in love, you embarked on that journey of step parenthood. And really sadly, that relationship has ended. Can you talk me through heartbreak in our midlife? Because I think heartbreak in midlife is very similar to heartbreak when we're teenagers, but also very different. What do you think?
I think can only speak for my own circumstances, in that I think the way that relationship began and the timing of it was just as I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer.
It was a balm, wasn't it?
It was a balm. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
It was a happy ever after. It really was like a fairy tale. Someone sort of came along and swept me up with big, strong arms and told me everything was going to be okay. And
he was right. Because you're still here.
True. Thank you. Yeah. And, life as I'm a late developer, I always have been, in relationships. I I guess I just thought love would carry us through.
Yeah.
But there were other issues on both sides.
Okay.
And, again, like I talked about the children's biological father and the toll of my desire for another baby, I'm aware that step parenting isn't an easy job at all. But there were also, there were big issues on both, on brought into the relationship on both sides. So when that ended, it broke me in a way that I think everything that nothing else quite had, because I think the difference, and I only worked it out, I think maybe 6 months or a year after he left, I sort of had this, I couldn't work, I just couldn't. I stayed stuck in that darkest point for so many months, if not, a year beyond. I just couldn't, I was broken. And I couldn't, everyone around me, again, they just like, come on, Em, come on, you've been through worse than this, or come on, wanting me to find that strength, and I couldn't. And then I realized the difference. It's like, I've been through cancer. I've been told I've got cancer 3 times. I've nearly lost my life to a movie style bug. Why is this flooring me? And I think the difference was with each of my cancer diagnoses, there was always hope. So you'd get that, right. Yes, it's cancer.
But we've got a treatment.
But we're going to sort it out. It's going to be okay. We can't talk about forever, but it's going to be okay. And that's what I've had each time. So you just galvanize yourself and you get on and you start to see the light. And I think as much as I held on to hope for the first year, desperately, I knew deep down there wasn't any. And I think that's where depression, I'm not an expert, but I think if kind of if you think of what depression really means, there's a hopelessness, isn't there? And I think, so I think it really, that broke me open. The end of the marriage sort of split me into a million pieces. And again, but I've had euphoric times over the last 6 months where I felt what that has given me as well is that took me to the darkest of lows, but it brightened that lens even more, when I do get those moments of, I thought I had clarity before, I thought I had access to joy before, but my appreciation for joy is even higher. It's almost like hallucinogenic at times where I just feel so relieved. And there was a point, I think, maybe around the time once the divorce went through last summer, I was so relieved not to be waking up in a crying or in a depths of despair and heartbreak. That was enough.
Yep.
I was having a great day just because I wasn't feeling
I really get that.
Like I didn't want to open my eyes. And then I had another realization around, again, probably last 6-9 months was, hang on a minute. It was almost like I decided the end of the marriage was going to define me. Almost I imagined having, people saying at my funeral, well, she never really got over the end of the marriage, did she? She was never really the same after the marriage broke down. And that was a moment of, hang on a minute. So I'm just always talk about not letting cancer define me. Right. I don't even have cancer in my Instagram bio. No, I don't want to be defined by it. That's a conscious choice. I don't have, living with secondary breast cancer. But I decided on some level that I was never going to heal from a divorce, my heartbreak. So there were quite a few. So again, huge growth, huge pain. And, I'm absolutely at a point of acceptance with that. I still get waves of, what's happened over the last 2 years? Yeah. But no, I'm through that.
That's amazing.
But it's, that's rocked us as a family as well.
Of course, hugely. Because the kids, he was their stepdad. Yeah. And do they see him? Or is that, so that's all, okay. So you're then, I imagine for you, the way I've learnt your brain works in this last hour, you've probably gone into a bit of guilt about that one as well. Even though, again, that's someone else's stuff. It's fascinating as women how we take on other people's stuff. It really is. Your relationship with your dad shines through in the book. And I'm really interested in, because it's very rare to talk to someone who's got a closer relationship with their dad than their mum.
When I wrote the book,
And has that
It's
changed?
interesting. My dad's 90 in a week on Easter Sunday. He's wonderful. But my dad was always kind of like my safe harbor. But I think looking now, having done a lot of work, that attachment, anxious attachment, all stemmed from, there was too much of a dependency there, I think. And my mum, sadly, there was a real period of estrangement, which I won't go into now, but all around that time of the babies. And I have to say, in the last few years, I'm closer to my mum than I've ever been. And my dad is wonderful, but he's probably become slightly trickier as he's, and my mum's softened. My mum was a real tough cookie, and growing up loved my sister and I in a very different way to my dad, pretty tough woman, My mum has had, her own frailties now. She's 87, and there's a closeness there that I've never had with her, and I'm so grateful for that.
How gorgeous. And how did that
It
kind
happened,
of come
I think,
back?
when she began to, her health deteriorated. She's had a couple of strokes. She, for the very first time in her life, she's gone from being someone swimming in the outdoor pool and super fit, super, low tolerance for anyone, just get on with it, and she's developed more of an empathy and more of her own vulnerability. And only in the last couple of years, as she said to me, I now realise I can only imagine that what you've been through physically. There was a disconnect, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind
because
me
of
saying,
her inability to be vulnerable in a way that she can now.
Yeah, and there was that she was, and I can say this because sadly, she wasn't the one that I turned to during. She's very good practically when the babies were younger. She'd do what she could, but she wasn't the one I turned to for nurturing.
Yeah, it was Dad.
It was Dad and my sister and my friends, and now I just feel very, very strongly. I'm so grateful that they're both here. Feel very indebted to them both for various reasons, whether that's emotional, financial support, bailing me out in times of real kind of crisis, particularly over the last couple of years, having to sort of step in. So I carry that as well. So my feeling with my mum, who's not in great health now, that I just, the times we have together, I take her shopping once a week and I take her to hospital appointments. She's not had a partner for 40 years,
Wow.
She's been on her own by choice in a way, but maybe a bit of a wall up. I just hold her hand, and I just want her to feel loved, and I want her to feel physical contact and warmth, and I feel very grateful that I'm having these weeks and months with her where there's nothing left unsaid,
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. When I saw you were away in Texas last week. So when you're away, who has the kids?
So,
well, obviously Jake's 21.
So that's
now.
the wonderful thing. Jake's 21, and he also has a girlfriend who's a few years older. So
do they look after the kids?
They were there. One of my best friends stayed for 4 days. So that was actually, it just worked out seamlessly. I'm so lucky. And Jake has been incredible. And it's funny.
Well, he's always loved having all of these siblings, hasn't
he? He loves
certainly
them.
What you said in the book.
I mean, that was, it's quite a big age gap still. And I think as they get older, they'll get closer.
Siblings are siblings, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of love there, but I think it's, again, very different personalities. And I think the closeness will grow as they sort of balance out a bit more. And he's, there's a lot of noise in the house still. There's a lot of like high energy, and sometimes his nature is such, he just retreats. But I think it was amazing. I flew to Texas, where I said goodbye to the kids the day before Mother's Day. And I went into my bedroom as I was sort of finally packing, and there was a card on my bed, and I thought, I'm going to open it. It was, the day before Mother's Day. And, in the words, it's all you want from every mother, all you want is the words in a card. And he's become amazing in the last few years at expressing himself in cards. But he said, oh my goodness, he said, you were and still are the best mum I could ever hope for. And I'm so proud of how you've got your strength back over the last couple of years, and how you still and how you balance life and work and being there for us. Don't ever feel guilty about, because I've been away a couple of times this year, and I've had, and I've, again, the internal so don't ever feel guilty about taking time away. You deserve it so much. And what a gift. I mean,
yeah, but what truth as well, though.
Gift. It's like, and because there is part of me that feels should I be saying yes to an invitation to speak at South by Southwest in Texas? Well, yes, I am going to say yes. And, I was lucky enough to go to Iceland on a work trip a couple of months ago. But of course, it's that, should I really be, But there is a part of me that, and selfish isn't the right word, but there's a part of me that feels very strongly that I have to say yes to these things that are coming along, even if it isn't ideal, and even if it means I'm calling in favors. And I have to trust that the kids are going to be okay, because for my own growth and for my own sanity, but also I suppose I justify it with hoping that they're going to see me as living my life.
Right.
And having to earn money and having to be the provider, but also having to have a bit of a life balance, and I do feel an urgency to say yes to everything that comes along. And sometimes that makes me think,
Okay, so we're coming to the end, but before we end, we love to end this podcast with a viewer, a listener question. So the question that's come in from a lady called Sophie is as follows. She says that she's just been diagnosed with breast cancer and she wants your help. The question is, how on earth do I navigate my life for the next 6 months?
Well, firstly, I would say there's so many things I could say. Firstly, the acknowledging that right now, as someone newly diagnosed, you're in shock. The worst has happened. And I'm hopefully with a very good prognosis, but you've heard those words. When you start your treatment, often the hardest bit is from hearing those, or, waiting to hear those words, hearing those words, and then starting treatment. When you start your treatment, it's always amazing how you adjust. We are so adaptable, and you're on that treadmill of treatment.
You're in the machine, aren't you?
And you're counting down your chemos, whether it's 8, 7, 6, and the hair, even the anticipation to losing your hair, if that is imminent, is never as bad when the hair's gone, because once it's gone, it's only going to come back. So
and it becomes the new reality.
It becomes the new reality. Yeah. Again, I would say yes to every offer of help. Let yourself be held. Let yourself be held. Say yes, trust and know, and look for stories of hope, and know that time will pass and summer will be here, or the autumn will be here, and there will be a moment where you'll catch yourself and you'll think, through the other side, or I'm getting there, but also recognize that something has happened that is altering you sort of forever. But there will be gifts with it, and there will be moments of magic. It's a hard one. There's no definitive answer, is there? But just reach, if you can reach out. Reach out to me. But take things in bite-sized chunks as well. I mean, I spent, in the first brutal chemo 14 years ago, the second brutal chemo 10 years ago, because the others have been more manageable. I spent first time around I had the babies but the second time around, I remember I just spent 8 hours a day on the sofa watching, just sleeping, made every episode of reality telly and sleeping and just get through it. But there will be lightness again, that you will laugh again. You will feel joy. You will.
And that's why you're doing this, because you needed that 14 years ago. You needed you saying that to yourself.
I didn't have it.
No.
I was on an island,
Yeah, and you're giving it to others. And that is what makes you so amazingly special. I have absolutely loved meeting you. I have had a bit of a crush on you for years. I followed you on Instagram for years.
I've got a crush on you now.
Here you are in front of me. It's just been an absolute joy to talk to you. And you are an inspiration. Please keep living that limitless life. We'll do this again.
Please, you can come on my podcast.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks, Jo.
If you want to hear from more amazing women like Emma, then don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so that our channel can grow and we can bring you more high quality guests with their incredible stories. Thank you for listening and see you next time.